Stay tuned for A Ride on the Moon, a premiere of Apollo 15.
Questions about the nature of the universe, its boundaries, man's role in it. Maybe so. But right or wrong, the irresistible challenge has drawn human beings on the first steps outward. With technical ingenuity, with remarkable teamwork, men have 3 times navigated space to land upon another world. Soon, a 4th visit, the most ambitious one, that will include a ride along the moon's surface in this interplanetary dune buggy. And while they explore, we watch through the technical ingenuity and teamwork of earthbound men and women. Here at NBC News, we've consistently presented the most complete coverage of man's journeys into space. And now we're ready again for Apollo 15, from launch to splashdown.
Launch coverage begins Monday morning at 5 a.m.
Stay tuned for a preview of the flight of Apollo 15.
Apollo 15 marks mankind's second giant leap in exploring the moon. 2 years ago this week, man first set foot there. Now he is ready to climb aboard a moon buggy like this one, but with a different driver, and begin exploring the lunar surface by wheel. It will enable him to stay longer, go farther, see and do more, and vastly expand what he knows about the moon and its history.
This is a CBS News special report. A Ride on the Moon. The flight of Apollo 15. Tonight, a close-up view of the lunar rover and the crew of America's 4th lunar landing mission. Sponsored by Western Electric, the people who make communications equipment for the Bell system. And by orange-flavored and new grape-flavored Tang, for spacemen and Earth families. Reporting from CBS News headquarters at the Kennedy Space Center, correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. Out there on the launching pad, Apollo 15, waiting to go on the most hazardous moon mission yet, a landing across 15,000-foot mountains on the edge of a mile-wide gorge. But the scientists say worth the risk, potentially the most valuable trip yet beyond the atmosphere. And after this flight, there should be less talk about space flights beginning to look and sound alike. This one will be different in many ways. Longer, 12 days, compared with 10 for Apollo 14. Busier, both for the 2 men on the moon and the one left behind in the command ship. Until now, he's been something of a wallflower while his buddies did kangaroo hops on the moon's surface. This time, he'll operate a $3 million battery of cameras to map more than 1 million square miles of lunar surface. And as valuable scientifically, the game plan calls for enough experiments and rock collection to make even some scientist critics of earlier flights happy. What makes that possible is the moon buggy, the lunar roving vehicle, first automobile on the moon. Riding rather than walking, the Apollo 15 moon explorers will spend 20 hours outside their landing craft compared to 9.5 for Apollo 14. They'll bring back twice as many moon rocks. And while Apollo 14's crew covered a distance of 2.5 miles and explored an area about half the size of New York Central Park, this time the total distance traversed will be 23 miles, and the area explored equal in size to all of Manhattan Island. The man in the moon buggy driver's seat, Apollo 15 Commander David Scott, age 39, Air Force Colonel, veteran of Gemini 8 with Neil Armstrong. Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. Now Scott slated to be first to drive on the moon. His companion in the lunar rover, space rookie James Irwin, at 41, oldest of the 3. Irwin, an Air Force man by way of the Naval Academy, born on St. Patrick's Day, and once said he'd like to plant a shamrock on the moon. The man who stays behind, Al Worden, 39, also Air Force. His busy schedule calls for a walk in space 200,000 miles from Earth. Just one of many dangerous moments on this flight, and David Shoemaker talked about some of them with the crew.
This is a risk because we know more. For instance, I doubt if we'd attempted a landing over the mountains, into the mountains like this on the earlier flights, because we didn't know whether we could hit a point or not. So with our increased knowledge, we have increased confidence and decreased risk.
What's the feeling about the risks involved among the members of the Scott family?
Oh, I think the feeling inside the family is very comfortable. I don't believe that the family has any apprehension whatsoever, because in flying airplanes for these many years, why, we've come to understand the mechanical systems do occasionally have problems. And we know that the spacecraft have far more redundancy than any airplane that we fly. And I've had experiences in aircraft which were, I might say, far more, shall we say, exciting than Gemini 8. And I think we understand better the spacecraft business in some respects than we do the airplane business, because we know that we're further away from home. We know that we can't have a mistake. Therefore, the people who build and design a spacecraft design the redundancy and reliability into it that can always get you back.
Well, I think the risk is it's probably less, you know, than the last mission, because I think we know more about the vehicle. We have improved capabilities, and I personally have no concern about the risk. I think it's very, very small.
Is this something, the risk, that you and your wife talk about?
We've never really talked about any risk on the flight.
I have to say that there's a risk associated with all these flights. There's always a risk. There's a risk associated with flying an airplane or driving a car. We're sort of in the development phase. Even though we've had several flights, we're still in the development phase of space flight, and it's going to take us a long time before we get to the point where we're operational in space, like an operational squadron in the Air Force. We think we've got a spacecraft that's going to perform as well as we expect it to perform for the 2 weeks we'll be gone. But just like with anything else mechanical, there could be something that we've overlooked. So there is an element of risk. Now, I guess as far as we're concerned, that element of risk is a very low magnitude thing in our minds. And in fact, I think if we're talking about risk, we don't consider the physical risk. We're so far beyond worrying about the risk involved that we worry more about doing everything well, and we don't worry about the failure, the mechanical failure that could occur.
Until now, you had to ride in one of these to taste new grape-flavored Tang. NASA chose it for the moon flights, just like orange-flavored Tang. But today you don't have to go that far. New grape-flavored Tang is here, with more vitamin C than orange juice, just like orange-flavored Tang. New grape-flavored Tang instant breakfast drink for spacemen and Earth families.
The lunar rover isn't very big or very fast. It hasn't got leather upholstery or 300 horses under the hood. But it's the most amazing land vehicle ever invented, because the land it drives on is the moon. And when it goes there, Tang goes too. Orange-flavored Tang, the instant breakfast drink with more vitamin C than orange juice. Good, nutritious Tang for spacemen and Earth families.
We Americans are notorious automobile buffs, so to tell us the facts and figures about the first car made for export to the moon and show us how it works, here is Nelson Benton at Grumman Aerospace, Bethpage, Long Island.
NASA's alphabetical designation for this is the LRV, the Lunar Roving Vehicle. It'll probably wind up being called either the Rover, or a Jeep, or perhaps a buggy. It's a battery-powered, $10 million vehicle that is designed for obvious purposes to enable the astronauts to cover more territory, to allow them to carry more weight. For example, they can carry their whole tool assembly on the back of the lunar vehicle, and they can also bring back about 250 pounds of samples. The rover is built so that either astronaut can drive it, but for our purposes, my colleague from Grumman, Scott McLeod, is at the controls. Scott, how does it work?
Well, Nelson, we have a hand controller similar to that in a spacecraft, and I can control with one hand my speed, direction, and braking with just this one controller.
Let's go.
Okay. Forward gives me speed.
And how fast will the rover go?
Well, Nelson, the rover will go at about, up to 10 miles an hour.
And what about its turning capability?
Well, the turning capability, we use all four wheels to turn, and you can make a very tight turn like this.
What sort of hills can it go up and down?
We can navigate a hill as steep as 25 degrees up and down.
And how do they make sure they don't get lost and can't find their way back to the LEM?
Well, on the panel, there's navigation equipment that gives you your distance away from the LEM and the direction back to it at any time.
Tells you just how far away it is.
Just exactly where you are at all times.
One of the most intriguing functions of the rover is that it will serve as a platform for a television camera to take pictures of what the astronauts are doing at various stops along the moon's surface and send those pictures back to Earth. The ground can control the camera through what is called a ground control television assembly, and it's been nicknamed the Gotcha. Nelson Benton, CBS News, Bethpage, New York.
That camera ought to give us some of the most spectacular pictures we've ever seen of the most spectacular terrain on the moon. With me, as usual, I'm happy to say, is former astronaut Wally Schirra. Wally, this is said to be the most hazardous flight yet, but the scientists also say potentially the most valuable. Is it worth it?
Well, it has to be worth it. I guess one of the new things we're hearing about is a 5-in-1 shot, meaning that there are a number of events that can develop there in this area. We have a mountain range that's about 14,000 feet high, much like the Sierras. Mount Whitney, for example, is about just a little over 14,000 feet. But imagine moving the Grand Canyon up to the base of the Rockies or the Sierras, and you have a rill there. You have craters that are larger than the Cone crater that the crew of 14 had trouble finding. You have the rocks that have come down this mountainside that are falling into the foothills. They'll explore this. So there are 3 different EVAs, 3 different lunar excursions are the classical terms. All of these will bring us new data. And then the rill, this valley that was formed possibly by a volcanic tube, these are exciting to us. So when you add them all together, we'll get some real good yardsticks on what is the age of our universe, what is the age of our planetary system, what is the age of this large planet we call the moon.
And by exploring those rills for the first time, we may find out what made those canals on the moon, right?
And that's the part that gets everybody's attention, because it looks like a river. And of course, we have no water there, so it'll be a rather interesting trip.
That, then, is the story of this combination of exploration and scientific research called Apollo 15, which gets underway from out there on Pad 39, Monday at 9:34 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We'll be covering the highlights with Wally Schirra and a special guest during the moon rides, Apollo 14 Commander Alan Shepard, starting Monday morning at 7 Eastern Time. Walter Cronkite, CBS News, Kennedy Space Center. Good night.
NBC Week is 4 wheels, 3 crime fighters, 1 storyteller. NBC Week is Adam 12, patrolling a new night, new time in September. NBC Mystery Movie, 3 series in 1, where you'll meet Peter Falk as Columbo, the thinking man's cop, Rock Hudson as McMillan, a freewheeling police commissioner, and Dennis Weaver as McCloud, the marshal who rides the canyons of Manhattan. Something new, Peter Falk, Rock Hudson, Dennis Weaver, and Night Gallery, where this storyteller turns the commonplace into the bizarre. He's Rod Serling, and what can you expect? Even his backyard is a bit odd. NBC Week is Adam 12, NBC Mystery Movie, Night Gallery. And that's only Wednesday.
Hi, I'm Judith Barcroft, and I'm rehearsing for my new part on ABC's All My Children. I know you'll like the story just as much as I do. Won't you please join us every weekday?
At 1 o'clock here on ABC.
This Sunday night, see an exciting adventure, Tarzan and the Great River.
The jungle belongs to Barkuna. Tarzan, fighting his way upriver. Undertaking incredible tasks that tax his tremendous strength to the breaking point. And tackles overwhelming odds.
Now here, Swat. Tarzan and the Great River, this Sunday night.